I'm with Jennifer Orkin Lewis, who does beautiful, quiet scenes. Now, I'm just going to jump right into it and ask you, Jennifer, would you say that that is a fair representation of some of your work? Because I know that you do a variety of subject matter, but always in your style.
So my background is a textile designer, and I think because of that, I tend to pack my paper with lots of images and things going on, and they kind of look like they're in repeat often, unless it's a scene. But I do fill up a lot of space. So when you ask me about when you put me in the quiet thing, except that my goal has always been to quiet it down. Like it's absolutely true that that's what I want to do and that I try to do all the time. And maybe it's coming out more than I even see it, right?
That is a really interesting point, because busy or maybe a full page doesn't necessarily mean it's not quiet. I think you do achieve a tone. And I think that that is maybe what I react to the most in your work, that there is a general feeling to each piece, no matter how painterly or chaotic you might go about it. I would attribute that to color, but maybe you have some other ideas having that yourself. Does that sound right?
Yes. And I would say that true, even if it's a packed flower that I'm doing like full on, I'm always putting in some areas of softer neutrals or something where there's, I call it breathing space. You need to be able to like take a breath and not, when you use every single color in the world and they're all like the same values, or when I do that, and I do that by mistake sometimes, kind of, like you're not in the mood, it's not really working, and that's what happens. I don't like the piece because it's just too much. I feel like it makes me feel anxious, kind of. So yes, there's a certain amount of with color, and what I'm trying to work on more now, or what I've been like striving for and is harder for me that I'm working on, is bigger swaths of color, just with maybe nothing in it, and then there's more of the chaotic work in areas. So
that totally makes sense. I love that you brought up neutrals. I think that most of us in my world, how about I just put it that way, in the people that I get to see and come across in surface design and illustration, in that type of commercial art, we love bright colors. And yet, is it age? Is it to glorify those colors even more that we go to neutrals and realize that there's something there? I think that your neutrals are pretty special looking. Like even the pieces behind you, it seems that you mix your colors to get to a neutral, right?
I do. Yeah.
And the colors that you mix are typically already in the piece?
Yes, I use a lot of colors. There's no doubt that I use a lot of colors, but to make a new color, I often mix the ones I have together, and that will to make a new color. But because they're the same colors, it's harmonizing with the rest of them. So it's not just like pulling in a different one. And if I pull it all of a sudden, like on here, if I decide that I want a little bit of fluorescent pink, which I might, because I really like doing that, it's not going to be in a huge area. It's going to be like a little like spot that makes you surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before you start painting, do you have a plan? How much of a plan do you have? Do you want like a certain reaction from your viewer?
Yeah, so I'm a very, very intuitive painter. So I often have no idea where it's going. I mean, maybe with client work or a commission, I have more because it's more of a sketch to a.
Right. They want to know what's coming.
They want to know what's coming. I can't just, but on my personal work, which is most of it, I do a lot. I would say that I sometimes I'll start out with a color story that I want to work with, but I won't lock myself into that's all I'm allowed to do. I'm very happy to say, you know what, a little bit of this color added to it's going to work. It's going to help. So other times I just start and I do it by feel. And I make a lot of mistakes, you know, it's not all perfect, but I do paint with a lot of layers. So I go over things, I tone things down. It's a process.
You teach people. So I'm curious, what have you found that other people respond to and go, oh, is that you can layer and I can fix this mistake.
Oh yeah.
What have you found to be helpful for them?
Yes, we talk. I have a co-teacher as well, and we have similar technique. Her name is Gail Baker. But when we are teaching, we talk all the time about how you can just paint right, especially with acrylic gouache and gouache as well, but acrylic gouache even more. You can just cover something up and then go over it and start again. I mean, there's a certain point where it might get muddy looking, but you could do it. So we are constantly like, oh my God, I don't like this section. And people learn from that. It's very exciting because, you know, you're not stuck on this first thing that you did and I don't like it. And you're just spending all these hours working it. So you kind of find an aha moment and it's really fun.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about acrylic gouache versus gouache, and you also do watercolor. So for those of us who aren't familiar with those mediums.
Right. So acrylic gouache is this. It just comes in these little tubes, and it's technically I don't know what it is, but I guess it's something like half acrylic and half gouache. So it is once you paint it down and it dries, it's permanent on the paper. So if you paint on top of that again, it's not going to lift back up.
Okay.
So it's easier to paint another layer on top of it and keep it pretty clean. Water-based gouache. This, see, I have it all here. That's a Winsor Newton designer's gouache. That's just water-based, so it's an opaque watercolor. Yeah. And if you paint it thick enough, you can totally layer. I've always layered with this. I actually didn't even start using acrylic gouache till about 4 years ago. So everything was gouache before that. And watercolor also. And I don't do watercolor in any kind of technical way, you know, layering and glazing and anything like that. I do watercolor as a meditation pretty much, where I just love to see that glob of water and that color come into it and it flows, and what happens when the colors meet.
You know, I love that. You're my people, because one of my apprehensions in teaching watercolor is that I don't like watercolor books and I find traditional watercolor a bit boring, and I just really am fascinated with what the medium does on its own. Yeah. I haven't dabbled in acrylic gouache, although I've seen some beautiful pieces with it, but I do like to be able to rework.
And I've done acrylic gouache as watercolor, where I just add a ton of water to it and then it does that. It's not the same exact, it's not as translucent, obviously. So when I'm teaching, just teaching people about the joy of the process rather than the final outcome is what is really the main goal. Because if you're not enjoying what you're doing and you're only trying to get something good that's going to hang up on the wall, I mean, you might not ever get there. That's really hard, right? So, but imagine just loving what you're doing for the 2 hours you're sitting there, and then that thing is special. That's that, and working quickly and using a big brush and trying new things and adding some pencil into it, and just like, there's no rules. That's what I always say. There's no rules. I have no rules for myself. I just want to play, and I really just want to have a good time.
That's perfect. I think that is probably much more difficult, especially for a beginner like that. And yet that is also kind of what we're always building towards as artists, to just keep enjoying and
Right.
stay in the moment, like keep creating and loving that process.
And by me saying that doesn't mean that I'm there all the time. I mean, I have many times where it's just like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? This is coming out like crap. And I'm not happy. I gotta stop. So actually, what I'm doing this summer is taking off of social media completely, since I turned it off in July. And I have to say that it's a fantastic thing to do, because there's no, there's so much of feeling like you have to, you're painting and it's like for Instagram, or it's for something, or it's to be seen. And I haven't shown my work to almost anyone for the whole month. And I've done more work this month than I've done in a long time. Like, I've just been painting up a storm. And it feels like that space of being alone with it is really helpful. And I would recommend that.
I was thinking about this just yesterday, in that my husband and I were talking about AI, and I thought, the more that we soak ourselves in everything else going on out there, the more we're going to replicate what's already there. But really, what is going to be special about us human artists is what we bring to the table that has not been done before. And it doesn't have to be anything revolutionary, but just that creative spark. If it's coming from, if it's coming externally, that's the same thing that AI does. It has its creative spark by reaching out, and we need time to reach in to a place that no one else can touch.
It feels good. It feels really good not to be, there's no comparing. I mean, I don't feel like I compare that much, but that you see things you like and you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe I should try that direction a little bit, and to not be looking at anything is really helpful. And then, the first 2.5 weeks, I did stuff and it wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I feel like last week I kind of hit a place where, oh, well, this is kind of a beginning of something that I'm interested in. Which is amazing. I mean, and it does have more of the quiet, the breathing space, and it's interesting. Yeah.
So just to finish off with some tips, when you begin your piece, let's say, well, first of all, do you work outside plein air? Are you inspired by just being right there? Do you take photographs and or do you work from imagination?
I strive to see if I can ever paint outside plein air, and I kind of stink at it. I'm not that great. So sometimes, but it's not my thing. So I take a lot of pictures, but I would say my work has a lot of memory and imagination and intuitiveness, as well as something real. So, if I'm painting something, a person or a dog or a flower, I've gotten pretty good at doing flowers like that. They're in my memory, like a kind of an encyclopedia, but still I need to see something, because I don't have that kind of memory where I remember like what things look like, or a person standing there in a certain pose. I can't do that out of my head. But so, yeah, it's a combination. I'll take a lot of pictures together and merge them into one different thing, like pull things from different places.
Yeah. Does that make it tricky with like perspective and planes, or do you just disregard it?
Yeah. So it was interesting because I was talking about this recently with someone, and I'm not that interested in perspective. I don't mind a little bit of perspective, but I think maybe as a textile designer, my things are flattened out anyway. So like I might have a perspective where a person is bigger in the foreground, and the background, they're a little smaller, but then the whole background has flattened out, like the city is flat. I'm not always trying to do a realistic, this is the point of the horizon and blah, blah, blah. I've done it, and I kind of know the rules a little bit.
You're over it.
I don't really care. I don't feel like I need to do it. I don't think you need to, if you don't want to. I mean, if you want to, fantastic. But might have a little bit more of a flat plane.
Yeah. So you just kind of treat everything as like planes of color, like chunks.
Yeah. I try to work with planes of color and the way colors interact together. Color is very, very important to me. So how, you know, I feel like that's the first impact. And drawing well, I mean, I work on my drawing. I think that's important to get things looking good, you know, I mean, to look, so, I mean, you can abstract it, but I feel like an abstraction should come from a beginning of a realistic thing.
To see more of Jennifer's work, you can go on her website, and her Instagram are both August Wren, right? August Wren is your handle, and augustwren.com is your website.
August is the month and Wren is the bird.
I love it. Try your hand at this style with a very lesson targeted to do so. Explore this one and so many others in Watercolor Bold. Try it out for free and learn as much as you can. Thank you for making the time to talk to us.
That was fun. I enjoyed it.
Good.